Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. My guest today is the youngest that I've had on this podcast so far, 17 at the time of this recording. But George Hadaway has already set in motion a remarkably fulfilling life trajectory. He's a young photographer, angler, and traveler that's really breaking the mold of what many his age are doing, living a really fulfilling life behind the lens of a camera and a fishing rod. I first saw photos of a young Hadaway holding an alligator gar and started following his adventures ever since. Travels to Africa, French Polynesia, Asia, and around our country to fish and capture moments in photography. This is an awesome young man, way ahead of his years, living life the right way. And it's a great conversation that other young folks can draw some inspiration from. His appreciation for the outdoors is eloquently captured in his photography. Still frames of moments in the wild caught with professional grade quality. What I like about George is that he promotes an active lifestyle, one that I think young men were meant to live. And so he's got a valuable message to bring to this podcast, and that's really the whole point of this thing, a push to those called to the outdoors. This is George Hadaway of George Hadaway Media.
Okay. We'll just jump right into it. So, George Hadaway, I'm pronouncing it right, correct?
Yes, you are.
Well, welcome to the program. I've been a somewhat of a fan for about, 2 years. I think the first time I saw you, you seemed much smaller, but you were holding a big old alligator gar sitting in like waist deep water with a bunch of, mud and grass around you. I'm like, all right, another young gun on the gar scene. So that always gets me excited, but a little bit of extra digging. It looks like you've done a lot more than just that. But just start with that gar thing. I mean, when did your fishing start? I mean, all I know is when I was your age or that size, I was not catching fish like that.
So it all leads back to my dad, right? I mean, I think most people that get obsessed with fishing, they have someone to mentor them along the way. And for me, that happened. I didn't get completely obsessed up until the age of about 10. My dad would take me fishing all the time, but I just never really felt the bug hit all the way. And it was one trip when I was about 10 where he took me down a famous canyon here in Colorado called the Black Canyon. And it's known for having really good fishing. And I caught a 22-inch brown trout in there. And that was my first kind of real fish. And from then on, it just created a storm. And I have never stopped ever since. And I remember when I was a kid, I would always watch River Monsters. And, they have the episode with Jeremy Wade and he's in the Trinity. And ever since I had seen that episode, all I could think about was catching a big alligator gar. Because I lived in the DFW area and I was like, okay, they're here. How do I get one? What do I do? And what ended up happening is I just entered a whirlwind of research and all this. And I decided for my birthday, I'd asked to go on a half-day trip with a guide, a pretty famous guide who I think was the guy who took out Jeremy Wade.
It was Bubba, right?
It was Bubba.
Yeah. He's a character. I know that boat from anywhere. So
yeah, he's a very interesting guy. And he knows where the fish are. That's for sure.
He knows his stuff. There's no doubt about that.
Definitely. Definitely an interesting individual. I think I might go fish with him this summer. So looking forward to that to get in some more gar. And we were fishing. It was the spring, and we just been hit by a big flood, and it was hard. The gar were all spread out. They were hard to hook, hard to everything. And the day's wrapping up, and Bubba takes us up into an abandoned, I guess it was so flooded back in Palestine, and he took us out into this abandoned field where they had deer feeders, and it was so flooded that the deer feeders, you could just barely see the top of them. And we casted out a big carp head, and instantly just got hooked up to like a 6-footer. And from then on, I was just couldn't stop thinking about it, and that just started a whole bug of fishing, and then big fish, and you know how it goes. And that also kind of started the travel bug for me. And that's another story for later. But yeah, just adventure fishing is what just sets my blood boiling. I just can't get enough of it.
Yeah, no, that's been kind of a common theme already with this podcast thing, and the early developments. All this is people kind of finding their way into fishing from, I don't know, maybe a popular YouTube person, maybe it's Jeremy Wade, maybe it's programs like that. But it's I've had this conversation already a few times. I feel like that guy catches a lot of undue flack for the programming, but I try to remind people for your show to be successful for however many seasons it's been, nine seasons or whatever.
Oh yeah.
You have to inject a little bit of drama, a little bit of entertainment into it. So, this guy knows what he's doing. He doesn't believe some of those fabled myths, but the effect that show has undoubtedly had is it's gotten a lot of kids that may have not otherwise been interested in fishing to go to their local pond or their local creek. Even if they're just playing games, like they're imagining that they're Jeremy Wade, but it's getting folks outdoors. So it's funny that you would mention that. But when I saw you doing that, it's like, I was the same way as a kid, but I feel like, man, you have started your journey, at such an earlier rate that I'm real excited to see what your trajectory is going to be, just as an outdoorsman in general, because man, you're way ahead of the pack as far as some of the fish I've seen you catching. And I love the diversity too. That's a tone of this show that I really want to push, is you just diversifying your experiences outdoors. So I've seen you in the trout stuff. I've seen you dabbling in the carp world. I saw the alligator gar thing, obviously. So you're getting around from the oceans to the mountains to the swamps and everything in between. And you're doing it quickly at a young age. So it's it's really motivating to see. I feel like the younger guard of anglers and outdoorsmen are more that way. And it's good to see, because there's been nothing more frustrating, especially with regard to fish like gar, where they were looked at in with disdain, or it's not worth going after. And I feel like that sort of grandfathered in mentality is going away. So it's a good thing to see. It's motivating to see. But man, and I don't want to even jump off that topic necessarily, but then I see, so, I did a little bit of digging, but then I didn't realize you had such a knack for photography, which is I've got a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda, or ought to be hobbies. And I feel like that's one of them. I really, really, really admire passionate photographers for some reason. It's not really a skill of mine, but I feel I don't know. It's I'm eager to meet somebody that can almost provide a mentorship, because wildlife photography is before I was ever a fisherman, I was a wildlife nut. And you were probably the same way. I was just always that kid from the time I can remember. I just wanted to see animals. So to be able to see them maybe a little more intimately, through a scope right up close and personal without disturbing them, seems so fascinating and interesting to me. So now that one, and I was blown away by the quality of the photos that you've taken, because you just came back from where was I think I wrote it, Tanzania, right? You were in Africa or something.
So I went over to Africa for 17 days. And for me, that wasn't even a fishing trip. It used to be for me, if I was going anywhere that had even a distant possibility of there being fish, I would bring a rod, and all I would do is fish. And I matured a little bit. You know, it's not to say I'm still obsessed with fishing,
Mhm.
but I've definitely diversified my interest a little bit. And I'm a completely self-taught photographer from the age of, let's see, I was 13. So right about when I caught that gar, I got my first camera. And it was a really old Nikon. I think it was a D7500. I might be wrong on that. It's been so long. And it was like really basic entry level, and it was older than I was, I felt like. And that gave me like this motivation, having a nice at the time for me. It was great to learn on that. That camera really set me off on that as well. And I just got obsessed with it. And it was the same thing with fishing. I just started watching video after video after
Mhm.
video on YouTube because it's the best way to learn, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I've learned so much more on YouTube than I ever will in school, and I think and I stand by that. I've never taken a photography class. Everything I know has been on YouTube, and it's all been free information. And it's so cool to have this giant encyclopedia of knowledge out there of people that are willing to just share all that they know. I think their motivation is probably to get views, but I see it as they're just giving away free knowledge. And that, just once I learned how to use a camera and manual and all that, kind of just set me up for some success. And once I got obsessed, I just never stopped. And I've been doing it all through middle and high school. And lately what I've done is I've combined photography and fishing. So now
Yeah.
everywhere I go, I bring a camera. And Africa was different. I brought a fly rod because they're easy to bring, but I probably only fished for like 10 minutes,
Mhm.
when I had the time. And what I realized is that was fine with me. All the photos I took, all the wildlife I saw, the crazy stuff that happened, it was just so amazing. And the fact that I didn't need to fish to experience that was pretty enlightening. So yeah, it was a crazy trip. I took over 11,000 photos while I was there. Took me, I think, 4 or 5 days to narrow that down to like 100, and then keep kind of going down with it. But yeah, if anyone wants to get into photography, the thing I recommend is just start with a really entry level camera and build up. You can learn the basics, learn how to shoot in manual, everything that there is, learn that camera like the palm of your hand.
Mhm.
And once you do that, and once you get all that figured out, and software especially, I think that like 60% of the photo is on the computer. I really believe that.
Yeah.
It's crazy what Lightroom editing will do to your photo, and that's a resource that definitely should be utilized, if you want to bring your photography to kind of the next level. If you can always make mistakes out in the field, and Lightroom can fix most of them. So but yeah, not to get off on another little path, but
No, I mean that's the name of the game on this thing. I don't want to corral your thoughts and your
mhm,
words. You know what I mean? I don't want to keep you from. I want you expanding on this stuff, but it's you can draw parallels between camera gear and just about anything that you use in life. I like that you mentioned starting with something basic because I
yep,
mean if you get good with a basic camera, or if you get good with a basic rod and reel setup, or if you get good with a
mhm,
basic whatever in life, you're only going to be better at using the good stuff and more
exactly.
prepared when I don't know if you kind of operate that mentality in anything in life, if you
Mhm,
kind of embrace the difficult routes that you might take, makes it a
yep,
lot easier when the comfortable routes inevitably turn uncomfortable because you can
yep,
kind of revert back to that. But yeah, that's interesting, and I really like when you're talking about. I got a little kick out of you saying that you learned most of the things on YouTube because that's it's YouTube and like even social media have opened the floodgates to a lot of things. A lot of it bad, a lot of it good, and a lot of it even that is bad can be, I don't know. I mean, if you look at it, you can make lemonade out of just about anything. But I'm the
yep,
same way. I mean, there's a lot of skills I don't have. if my car breaks down on the side of the road, first thing I do, I don't grab a wrench, I don't grab a tire iron. I go to YouTube and try to figure out how to fix, because everything's on there.
Exactly.
And I applaud the people that put out content, whether it's video, whether it's written, whether it's podcast, whether it's whatever, where it's informative. That's probably more my speed, but you know, I appreciate what YouTubers, even, it's not my thing, you know, to go out and make a silly video and fish with a pool noodle, or make a video of Karen's calling the cops. You know, it's entertaining, I guess, but not my speed. I couldn't do it, but I appreciate what those guys do, because a lot of times their viewership is from younger people, and it's getting folks outdoors. So, so that's okay. But yeah, and I think the next thing that we can do too is, you know, if you're the type that's gathering information, or you're consuming information, or you're consuming people's content, you know, it seems like you're the type who's kind of paying it forward, and you're also, you know, hang on a minute, we may have to. Okay, a strange pop-up came up on the screen. I can edit all this out. I was like worried something stopped. I was worried something stopped working. But yeah, no, I mean, you know, when it's always nice when people share the experiences they're having too, because it's very easy to take those things and keep it all for yourself, or, you know, make the experience be more about like what you've accomplished and what you've done, and
Definitely,
and less about trying to push and encourage other people to go do it. So, but the photo stuff that you did, I was like, oh wow, like, you know, I think Africa's always kind of been on a radar of mine anyway, of a place that I want to go. But I like that you mentioned too that, you know, you brought rods, but you're more focused on, I don't know. I noticed that we do that a lot as anglers, where if you get so focused on the bite and the objective is so much focused on catching the fish, there's a lot of things that go on when you're outdoors in your peripheral that you miss, that you don't want to miss. And that's always kind of been my thing. And I learned that from some guys that I've spent time with outdoors, that, you know, sometimes you have to walk a little slower. Sometimes you have to take the long way around, because there's the unplanned things that seem like they happen in the outdoors are always my favorite. So like right now I'm working on a video project with a buddy of mine, this guy, Josh Dolan.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of the video that we've got, the coolest moments that we've gotten have been like wildlife that we encountered. We got, you know, I guess this is a spoiler alert because none of this has been dropped yet, but last time he was out, you know, I've gone up to Virginia. He's come down here to Florida. We've gone out to Texas. We've moved around. But we got some cool video of like bison out on the prairies. Yeah. We got a real cool video actually out on the Trinity River when we were doing an alligator guard video of this huge, like it was like a 10 or 12 point buck. You know, because you know how those rivers are on the Trinity. It's like mud bluffs.
Oh, it's
like it's these horrible like cliffs made out of mud. Well, this buck was like down on the bluff. It was like bedded up, and he saw us, but he couldn't get up the cliff. So you know, if I was just only watching the river and I was only looking for rolling gar and I wasn't looking, you know, left or right, I might have missed that. But we got some real cool video of that big deer. I mean, right up close, like to where you can see the flies flying around its eyeballs.
God.
But we got one, a real interesting one. We got a video of this giant bobcat out here in Florida hunting iguanas in the bushes of like South Florida. Cool. It's a really interesting dynamic. Like you got like this ultimate native predator, and it's chasing this invasive species. And there's a lot of parallels between the program that we were filming anyway. But it's really cool because, you know, you would never notice that if you were so focused on trying to catch the fish. So, you know, I try to encourage people a lot of times, like, stop focusing so much on catching the fish. Like, you're going to stress yourself out. You're going to miss all the unplanned things. You know, you're not going to find the true happiness in what you're doing. But it seems like, I think, especially guys that are just into photography, they're detail-oriented, detail-minded people who want to like capture moments. So I always really admire good photographers. There's actually, you know, a list of people that I have that I want to contact for this podcast, and a few of them are strictly wildlife photographers. No hunting, no fishing. It's something that's really interesting to me. So that's really cool. And I like the fact that you say that you're self-taught. That's wild. I've always been like, there's so many things I want to do, but I'm like waiting on somebody to show me how. So maybe I
Yeah.
need to just move on things. But yeah, but just going back to the Africa one, where were you? I don't even know how to like segue into this, but it's like one of my bucket list fish. Like you've already knocked off a couple of my bucket list fish.
Mhm.
Is those Napoleon wrasse? Is that what that was?
Oh,
The big blue one, right?
Yep, Napoleon.
Where was that at?
So that was in
Polynesia.
Polynesia. And I went into that trip and it was a family trip and the whole family was down there. And what it was two families, one of my good friends, Max Kaufman, who is just obsessed with fishing, just like I am, and will fish all day and all night till the bite happens and he gets what he wants.
Mhm.
And it was a family trip. I wasn't expecting to do much fishing the first time, but because I've been twice, because it's a great family destination. And the first time I went, I caught some really big bonefish, and it was amazing. It was like a promised land.
Yeah.
My friend Max caught a 30, I think it was a 32-inch bonefish. It was the biggest bonefish I've ever heard of.
Oh
It
my
was huge. It was
gosh.
over 12 pounds. And those don't really exist anymore in like Florida and the Keys
Mhm.
and the Atlantic. They've kind of been all fished out. And to find a place that still has them and they're very much willing to eat a fly was pretty cool. So I was like, okay, I gotta go back. And this second time we went, it was in March. So it was my spring break. Me and my dad and Max and his dad decided to book like a little live aboard boat type situation. And what that enabled us to do was we went and went over to this remote island called Fakarava, I believe, and it was way out there in Polynesia. And it was really hard to get to. But what I ended up encountering out there was just rich, incredibly rich coast out there around this island. I don't think I've ever had fishing that good. And it was funny how it all happened. And what ended up happening though with the Napoleon is I had never heard of one. It wasn't even on my radar. And all of a sudden, this is a couple days into the trip. We're only fishing top waters. It's all we were fishing. We jigged a little bit for dogtooth tuna, which was great, but we couldn't keep them buttoned. They kept getting sharked.
Mhm.
Max hooked it was over 150 pounds. It was huge. She was getting absolutely destroyed on a 18,000 Stella. Just could not even do anything to it with like 40 pounds of drag on it. Just was ripping him. And it just got sharp right before he got to the reef. So the dogtooth were not cooperative. They're really hard to land. And that was a big bucket list. And I caught like a 20-pounder and it was great. But I'm gonna go back out and get a 100-pounder. It's my goal. But what ended up happening is we were throwing topwaters for GTs, and that is a hard game. You are casting giant poppers bigger than your shoe for hours and hours and hours. And I don't think I've been that sore in a while. I felt like I had just run a marathon. And it was like the end of the fourth day. And I was in the bow, Max was in the stern, and Max cast his big popper out. And all of a sudden, he gets a follow because the water's so clear over there. You can see everything.
Yeah.
And I see this just giant blue behemoth come up behind his popper. And I was like, dude. And so I started yelling at him. I was like, Max, pop, pop, pop. There's a huge fish behind you. And he wasn't able to get it to commit. But what I learned later is that Napoleons are really curious fish and they're pretty intelligent. And it saw a boat. I don't think this fish had ever seen a boat before or a lure. And it all of a sudden it just starts swimming like about 2 feet below the surface towards our boat. And I was like, that's the wrong way. But it basically put me in a perfect position to make a quick little, it was like an 8-foot pitch. It was I just flipped my top water out there and I give it 2 big pops and then a twitch and I just let it sit there. And all of a sudden I just see this giant bucket of a mouth just crush it
Oh
out.
my
I mean,
gosh.
just came up behind it and it was like a 5-gallon bucket opening up behind my lure. And I was going crazy. Everyone was going nuts. And, I kept him buttoned, thank God, because that was a hard fight. I mean, it was like a 10-minute long fight. And we got him in and we pull them in the boat. You never gaff them because they're endangered, and you got to release them. They're
Okay.
not good eating. It's like playing Russian roulette with ciguatera. Like you're gonna get sick.
Hmm.
And so we pull them in through the tuna door because it was like 40 pounds, and I go, "What in the hell did I just hook?" I had never heard of one before. And what my friend Tom, who was the captain, said is he said that's a really rare fish, and that's what most people come down here to catch. And I'd been so obsessed with the GTs, I didn't even think of like that there's all these crazy other fish down here to pursue that are
Right.
just as much of trophies, if not more. I got so lucky with that thing. It was the only fish of the trip. That was that, in my opinion, that cool. And it was so much cooler than I think any GT I'll ever catch, even if if I get one over 100 pounds, it's probably gonna be different.
Yeah. Well, that's a fish. I mean, I've never caught either of those, but it's for people that might be listening that don't know what we're talking about. A Napoleon wrasse. I don't even know how to describe this thing. It's like a mix between a gigantic parrotfish, but without the beak, or like a Goliath grouper, or I don't know. It is massive,
They get
giant. Like, and these things get into the hundreds of pounds, but they are bright, like blue, not navy
Yep.
blue, not silvery gray blue. It's like as blue as a blue t-shirt. So they're a
Fluorescent.
wild, colorful, just
Mhm.
gnarly looking animal. And so, it's one of those things that, I mean, you can't mistake it for anything else, I don't
Mhm.
think. But man, I'd seen photos of those things online and went down like the rabbit hole of just Googling
Yeah.
and YouTubing. And it's funny you mentioned how curious they are, because apparently they're like, they're a real popular fish with the divers, because
Yeah.
they like to come around. And I was watching these videos, these things look like, giant barn doors swimming around down there.
That's
I'm like,
what
oh,
they are.
what would happen if that thing got, pissed off at you or something? That's my imagination running. But I didn't know beyond that. I didn't really know. I see these photos of people holding these giant things in their laps, and it does seem more interesting to me even than a GT. I think,
Mhm.
some sport fish just attain a level of, I don't know, they've just become an iconic symbol of sport fishing. And it's, they may not be the biggest, strongest, or hardest fighters. Although I think GTs, I don't, clearly, I've never caught one, but I mean,
Oh my
they look
God.
like they can rip. But
Oh,
something
I've
about those
been
Napoleon wrasse, and I want to get into the GTs because that's another bucket list item.
Mhm.
But they're not a flashy fish. They're just a
Yeah,
gnarly, nasty fish. But those Napoleon wrasse, I didn't realize that they would even take a topwater. It looks like a grouper. It looks like
it does.
something
It
that's
does.
like probably eating baits near the
Yeah.
bottom. So that's interesting. You caught one on top water. That is wild.
The fact that it was on a top water, and it was definitely not the biggest. I don't even know what you'd qualify like a big Napoleon as. I feel like there's not much. Not many people know about them.
Mhm.
They haven't, like anyone who fishes saltwater, when you say GT, they know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
But when you go up to someone and say, "Hey, I caught like a 50-pound Napoleon," they're not going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I was just so in shock. I was like, what did I just bring in? And it was just such a cool experience. And something about getting on like a 7-inch topwater lure, that was just so rewarding. Jigs are fun, but something about seeing a fish come up and blow up on a topwater, there's nothing like it. And then also sight fishing one on a topwater. I think that even
Oh,
brings
yeah.
it even further in my mind. There's topwater fishing and there's sight fishing. If you combine the two, it's just insane. But I mean, I think like the gar is my first fish over 100 pounds, and it used to
Mhm.
be like my favorite, the coolest fish I'd ever caught. And then when I held that thing, I was like, what exists in our oceans? There's some crazy stuff swimming
Yeah.
around that needs to be caught. Um, and it definitely wasn't the biggest. I mean, I see pictures of people on Instagram with like 80, 100-pounders or even bigger, just sitting in their laps looking like whales. But it was just And if they catch it on a vertical jig, I'd rather catch one that was smaller on a top water any day.
Mhm.
It was just like
Yeah.
the coolest fish I've ever caught. And
Well, it's
never
still
gonna forget.
a bigger and more unique fish than a lot of people, a lot of very seasoned anglers may ever see in a lifetime. So that
Yeah.
was, I mean, that thing is awesome. But
Just so lucky.
but the GTs, I mean, that's the one I really want to do. That's an interesting one to me. And I've always been kind of more a freshwater guy, but there's certain saltwater fish. It's like, you just have to catch them. So,
Yeah.
but that's always been a fascinating one to me because, and you've probably caught like Jack Crevalle in Florida.
Mhm.
It's like, it's almost essentially the same fish. Just our Jacks are obviously smaller,
Yeah.
but they're looked at but like it seems like based on what I've seen videos and stuff, like the behavior patterns seem similar.
They are.
The way they fight seems similar, but yet the Jacks that we have here in Florida almost looked at like the trash fish of
They
salt
are.
water, which is unfortunate. But
It is really unfortunate. And a guy on Instagram, his tag is Captain Jack Productions. He's a big fly fishing guide, and he makes these really cool fly fishing films.
I've seen his things. Yeah.
He recently, I mean, I think a couple of weeks ago, he made a new film called Jax. And this guy's fished all over the world. I mean, he's probably the most well-traveled angler I've ever seen. He's been to Mongolia. I mean, just the Seychelles, anywhere any country you'd think has fish, he's probably been. And what he realized is that,
Yeah, that's Jacko
Jacks-
Lucas, right?
yep, and Jacks don't deserve this rating as being a trash fish. He's caught 100-pound GTs, and he says that when he's in Texas and on the coast, the first thing he's fishing for is Jacks because they're so similar. They may only get to like 30 pounds being a big one,
Mhm.
but they fight so similar, and it's just, I don't know. And what's so weird is people say, "Oh, they're not good eating. They're Jacks." Well, GTs are also horrible eating, and they're certainly not a trash fish. I mean, I would never eat a GT. They're disgusting. So it's just weird how some of these fish get this really negative connotation, and that's why I've always been so obsessed with carp, because I always like, kind of putting the stereotype that carp are invasive and trash fish. And sure, Asian carp are horrible. But I mean, the good old mud bonefish that's living in probably 95% of America's waters is great. And what I realize is they're really fun on a fly because they'll tail just like bonefish. And I love bone fishing. I don't do it very often. It's really hard to get to somewhere that has bonefish. I guess Florida, but Florida's not what it used to be. And
Mhm.
you can go walk to your nearest sewer drain 5 minutes from your house and catch a 20-pound carp, sight fishing it just like you would a bonefish. And, they're just the most accessible out there. And the trash fish is totally undeserved. You got to stalk one on the fly or with a spinning rod and just pitch something in front of it for you to, people to really realize, wow, these things, they pull. They really do. So.
Oh yeah.
Maybe.
The trash thing's always been the trash fish thing's always been a lot of the fish that I like to pursue the most kind of sort of fall into that category. I feel like I said, I feel like that mentality is starting to die off.
It definitely
which is nice. But I mean, I encountered that term early on when I was first starting kind of transition from just like a kid that liked to be outdoors to like, I guess you'd call me like a fisherman. And, I wasn't sort of self-taught. My brothers took me a lot, but I was going out there a lot. It was just an excuse for me to get outdoors.
Yeah.
So I was running into these fish I knew nothing about. And then I'd have to come running back and try to figure out what they were. And I was like, well, this is the one that fought really hard and was awesome. And then I'd hear people say, oh yeah, but that one's actually a trash fish. And then I'd encounter another one that I was like really impressed by. And that one was also a trash fish. And I started to notice there was like this direct correlation between, it seems like all the ones people call trash fish are the most entertaining ones to catch for me.
Yeah.
So now, like, if I hear somebody say that, it actually like turns me on to the idea of wanting to go after them even more. But yeah, it's the carp ones, that's a funny one because especially with the common carp, that's like a weird one because they've been around so long. And I mean, they're literally in every single major bass
Yeah.
lake in the US, like the top 10 prominent big bass producing lakes in the country. All of them have common carp, a lot of them.
And I'd rather go fish for carp in those lakes than bass.
Right. Well, that's funny. And I think most it most a lot of kids that live nowhere near the coast, like they're never going to encounter the opportunity to
Mhm.
come across a 40-pound freshwater fish. Like the people that are living like in the interior of the US, that's a
Mhm.
monster. That's a giant animal to them. And my first fish that was ever, I guess, big. My first fish over 40 pounds was a grass carp when I was, I
Yep.
don't know, I was like 13. And I mean, I was like to the moon when I caught this thing. It's a pond that we lived on when I was a kid, right out of the backyard. Big 40-pound grass carp on a piece of bread. And that was like,
So
man,
fun.
that was it for me. But yeah, and I saw your pictures of the grass carp, some of the big grass carp. You know, it's always interesting to me though. I love to see people who are throwing plugs, are throwing baits, are doing different style fly fishing. So it's like,
Mhm.
you know, when you get that well rounded or well traveled, especially at your age, I want to get kind of into the travel stuff
Yeah, of
because
course.
there's photos of yours that I couldn't tell what was happening in, but I was like, there's definitely a story behind that.
Mhm.
Like you've got one picture where you're like on top of some strange bus, like a blue,
Oh,
like
that's a good story.
what is that bus? I'm like, I look at that bus, I'm like, I don't know what that is, but that looks
Oh,
like a that looks like a rolling good time. And I gotta
it
know more
is.
about that thing.
So it all leads back to one of my best friends. His name's Garrett. And right now, currently I live in like the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, which is a long ways away from where I grew up as a Texas boy in the city. Um, but I ended up here and I met a great group of guys here in Colorado. And some of my best friends, the most fishiest people I've ever known, that I'd rank up there with some of my great good guys I'd always ask to go fish with. Um, they live in Colorado Springs, which happens to be about a 3.5 hour drive from me. And I've just the relationship I've developed with them is so awesome that I find myself driving down there every other weekend if I can. And and a couple months ago, my friend Garrett, he texted me, he said, George, I'm buying a school bus. And I go, what? You're buying a school bus? Well, why? Why? What's the purpose of buying the school bus? And he said, well, my dad, he wanted me to have a little RV to drive around during college. And I said, okay, but why a school bus? Well, and he said they're really cheap. And I said, perfect, get the school bus. And he got it, and it was already, it had like it's got like 250,000 miles on it. Um, but it's already like set up to be an RV. It's got like a bed in it and a little, a kitchen sink that someone made out of like a hose, like a spigot. And it's great. It's got everything we need. And we decided we had to pick it up in California. So what the three of us did is we flew to California over Thanksgiving break, and we drove it back from California to Colorado, did a little fishing along the way, but it was just such a great adventure. And we've kind of turned it into this little like adventure mobile where we just drive around the US, and definitely has its issues. We broke down in Sedona for like 6 hours. But that's just what comes with going on adventures like this. Stuff's gonna go wrong. You just got to be ready for it, because there will definitely be, it could be like a little day trip, but something will go wrong eventually on no matter where you go. And
Well,
that's something I realized.
it's almost not an adventure if everything goes to plan. I don't
I
know.
agree.
You gotta have that I don't know, that like moment that you gotta like break through for it to be a good
Mhm.
story. It's like if
Definitely.
all the trips I've ever had where everything went according to plan are like things I get fuzzy on the details. If
Mhm.
somebody wants me to recollect them, I don't know. It's like, but when things like suck and something bad happens, I like you don't forget that. So, but
Definitely.
um, but that's interesting. So I don't know. I look at some of your stuff and I want to ask the questions that I imagine other people listening, especially people who are thirsty for adventure in their life. They just
Mhm.
haven't done anything. They've just
Yeah.
lived a mundane life, but they want to do these things. You know, people will ask simple questions like, I'm kind of like, I actually don't know these things. I don't know how old you are. I don't know if you're in school now. I don't know like what you're doing. I don't know what your plans are. I know this is kind of open-ended stuff, but like,
Yeah.
where are you right now? And like, what stage of life are you in? Are you between
So
semesters? I mean, where are you going here?
so right now I'm 17, almost 18. Well, I guess not almost. I turn 18 in May, so got a little while. But I think once I turn 18, the traveling, the money I've saved up to go do adventures, I think my travels, I will be going everywhere. Yeah, right now, so I'm in high school still. I'm starting to look at colleges. I'm gonna go visit colleges pretty soon in May. And I decided to do a semester, my second semester in the Bahamas. I thought it'd be a really good experience. And it's at a school called the Island School. And I didn't know if I was going to get in. I've heard it's pretty hard to get into. The application sure made it seem like it. And I just really wanted to go spend 3.5 months in the Bahamas because I was like, well, first of all, I can get out of just the crap of middle of winter here in Gunnison where it's -20 every other week
Ugh.
and go, and go catch some bonefish. And I'm so just grateful, especially to my parents for being like, sure, go ahead. Or one of my harebrained ideas to go pick up a bus in California. Sure, go ahead, George. It'll be a great experience. Cause a lot of this stuff I do has been motivated by my dad's younger days. And he had all these crazy stuff going on. He'd go travel he traveled for so long and he roughed it. And that's what I'm gonna do. But yeah, once I go to college, I'm planning on every summer to do at least one international trip if I can. And there's a way to do it really cheap, which if you're a college student, there's no other way to do it. So, one of my good buddies, Sam Crispin, who I've told you about,
Mhm.
he tells me if he spends more than like $1,500 a month when he's in Nepal or Thailand, he's doing it wrong. And so I've taken a lot of his philosophies and I'm going to be using that for the next two adventures I've got. Uh, I'm doing Bolivia in July with one of my good friends, Kevin, and I think you know why we're going, Golden Dorado.
That's
Um,
nuts. Yeah.
and then so exactly a year from now, I've had to plan things really far ahead for this expedition. I'm doing Papua New Guinea for 2 weeks. And that is also with Kevin. And I've realized it's always good to have a good travel buddy, someone who has your back. And we're teenagers still. He's 18, I'm almost 18. I'll be 18 when we go to Bolivia, and I'll still be 18 when I go to Papua New Guinea with him. And it's really good, I think, when you're as young as we are. And I gotta admit, we haven't. I mean, I've seen a lot of the world as far, because I'm pretty young, but I haven't. I'm still kind of sheltered. I'm still living with my parents. I'll be out in a year, but I think like a lot of the reason for me traveling and going to these places is I just want to go see the world. There's this whole globe out there that's pretty accessible. If you just save for a couple months or a year and put away money, you can get to these crazy places. Oman is ridiculously cheap, and then you can go catch GTs right there. And
Yeah.
I know that when I'm out of college, I'm not gonna have much, and the first thing I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna go travel. And then if I can do a year, that's great. And then I'll get back into the real world. And it's also so cool to have all these crazy experiences and stories you can tell of things you've done, and kind of helps motivate people to go do the same thing because this world's there to go see, and you've only got a limited, you got time, and why not go use it?
Mhm.
The time's ticking. I know I'm only 17, but I know that one day I'm going to be old and too old to go travel. And I think that I'm going to try as hard as I can to not go along with the American dream. I don't know if that's going to be possible for me, but I've read a lot of books that suggests people have done it, but eventually it sucks you back in after long enough. Good book I recommend is 10 Years a Nomad. It's about a guy who, he's in a kind of a shitty corporate job at a hospital, and he saves up and he goes on a trip to Thailand for his vacation. And he meets these people from other countries, like from Belgium and Europe. And he realizes that people in other countries, they go and they travel for a long time.
Yeah.
No matter where you're working there, they have like double the amount of time that Americans get to go travel, because the media portrays a lot of the world as this just shithole. Why would you go anywhere when America's safe? And there's this ocean separating us from the shithole across the ocean. And there's a culture out there that exists that's like, well, you know what? F that. Let's go adventure. And what this guy ends up doing is he goes abroad for 10 years. And what he does is he'll go travel for a year, keep it really cheap, like cheaper than the rent he pays in America. And then he'll come back to America, work for a couple months, and then he goes right back out, and he does that for a decade.
Mhm.
And to me, that's just so inspiring, that he did that and then wrote a book about it, presumably to inspire other people, which is just really cool that there is people that do that, and you don't hear about it much,
Right. No,
Um,
and I had to jot that down. 10 Years of Nomad. I got that one written down. I got to look that one up. But no, what you just went through is really, really, and that's kind of like the meat and potatoes that I wanted to get out of this.
Yeah.
And you articulate it really well, by the way, for somebody that's 17. And maybe it's because I don't know. I feel like that kind of travel probably humbles you to a degree.
It does.
So that's cool. But there's a lot of different kind of ears that I imagine are going to be listening to this. So, and I think that one, I really want to encourage younger people to do something similar. So the fact that you're expanding on how to do it and shedding light on the reality and the simplicity that it's not that hard to do, especially even on a tight budget, is encouraging. And I think that's what people want to hear. But for those who are older listening to this, especially like younger parents or even older parents, I think it's like our duty and responsibility to instill that in our kids. I'm a dad. I have 2 young daughters, and the last thing I want to do is make them fearful of taking risks or be a shelter parent, or if they, heaven forbid, ever say I'm passionate about, I don't know, chasing butterflies. Oh, there ain't no money in that. You're wasting your time with that. Like that's the worst. I mean, that is the worst thing that we can do. And so, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. The fact that you credit your parents with lending you this kind of freedom.
Yeah.
That's just going to build stronger relationships with your parents as well. When that level of trust is there. So it's all really important stuff. And I think too, like, I think back to whenever I was 17 and 18, and it's like, not to like make it sound like there's regrets, because I'm only 36. I'm still young.
Oh, you got it.
I had opportunities, because I think of this very vividly, because I've talked to other guys that are much more well-traveled than me and a lot younger. But I remember having a lot of opportunities between summer break. I went to a military school, but there were still opportunities to do semesters abroad. When I was doing like Spanish, there was opportunities. I remember they would come and like try to recruit people to go do this, like who wants to go do this. And for whatever reason, I never did it. And I sometimes wonder, I'm like, why did I not do that? Like, what was it? Like, what was, why was I in like a fearful mindset? I don't know. It's very strange. And I do also remember, because I was very passionate about fishing and the outdoors from an early age. But I think that I had this idea in my mind that, I don't know. It's like you're living in dream world. If you think that you can go do that stuff for a living, it'll just never work. You got to get a regular job. And I've had interesting jobs. I mean, I guess you could call it a regular job now. But I'm still carving out the time to do the things that I enjoy. And that's kind of twofold, especially as a parent. It's like, you want to do those things to a point that your kids see that you have something you're passionate about and you do it. You don't want to do it so much that you're not there for your kids. but you also want to like instill in your kids, like you're doing it at the optimal time in your life to do it. You know what I mean? Like I wish that I'd have got a lot of my stuff done, because at some point you got to be available for your wife, for your kids. But I'm like, damn, I think of all the time, and I had summer jobs where I was making money, plenty of money to go travel, and it's like I did not save it. That's another good skill. Clearly, somebody instilled in you. Good parenting, good whatever. Maybe you're just more disciplined a person than me, but that's an important thing I think for people that are out there making money is, and it's not a skill of mine. If or when my wife listens to this, she's gonna chuckle because I am not a good saver. She's quick to let me know about that. She's the financial guru.
Yep.
But it is something I'm trying to work on more. She's very supportive. She knows what my dream trips are, and she tries to encourage me her best way to save so that I can have them happen. And I'm very hopeful that this year will be my first year to go international. I've never been out of the country. I've hardly been out of the southeastern United States, but in recent years, the finances have been there to make these trips happen.
Yeah.
COVID, I was, I don't know, I kind of battled the anyway, I don't want to get into the COVID thing, but let's just say now travel restrictions aren't really in place. So hopeful that I can start doing these things for myself. But it is very interesting that, and I actually mentioned this on a previous podcast. A lot of people don't realize like the windows of opportunity to go and do these things are like constantly flying by you. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think if you have the vision to be like, I don't know, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, always like on a head on the swivel. Sometimes it is a good thing to take your eyes off the prize. Yep. And it's a weird thing to say, but I try to say that. Like if you get too focused on a certain objective, you'll miss those just unplanned opportunities to do something unique. And I think I had those opportunities come up, either didn't notice them, was oblivious to them, or was too fearful to take them. But you're approaching it the right way, and I would encourage other people who listen to take that to heart because man, when those opportunities come up to go do something unplanned, that sounds, I don't want to say dangerous, but unplanned, especially at your stage in life, it's not super risky to take those chances. You don't have a lot that can go wrong, but anyway, that's awesome. That's the stuff I really wanted to get into. I'm kind of curious, like you're sort of living in the moment now, but I mean, do you have a picture on like what is your objective? I don't know, like career wise, not that you should be nailing that down yet. I didn't know what I wanted to do until I was like a junior in college. But like, where's this going? Like, what do you see yourself doing? Like, I guess as a career,
I've thought a lot about colleges and I've thought a little bit about careers, which is, I must be doing something right if I'm thinking just a little bit about careers. Which as my dad said was much more than he thought about careers. He said he went into college, he wanted to be a Spanish teacher, and that's what he did for a while. And that also him, taking Spanish in college, that opened up like half the world to him, just that, then you're fluent in a second language that a ton of countries speak. And so he's been like all through that. But career wise, there's so many things I'm passionate about that I'm almost a little overwhelmed on what I'll do. I really want to major in college in film. I think that'd be really cool for me to do. So a lot of the schools I look at, they have some really good film programs, and like documentaries and that kind of stuff really interests me. And I know my way around a camera stills wise, and I think I'm proficient at videos, but the video thing, when I see a guy who's really good at filming and editing and making a beautiful story, I mean, I just feel awe. That's it. Cause realizing how hard it is to put together a 40-minute story that'll make people just feel all these emotions is really hard. And that's something that I would love to do as a career. And I think with that a little bit, there's definitely some exploration involved. And I don't know. I've got options, and I'm so glad that I do. For a while, fisheries biology interested me so much, and I had a pool pond in my basement for since coronavirus to about 2022 when we moved. I had to dismantle it and give my fish away, but I had just such a fun time like creating that ecosystem in there, and tinkering around with how fish did together, and filtration and all that stuff. And so I definitely could do that, but something about the film thing just really interests me. And I think the big thing is like that I could combine it, and hopefully try and make like travel, like, I don't know. There's not much thought into this, as you can tell, but like if I could somehow have a gig where I went and filmed documentaries abroad, that's just my dream right there. You basically get paid to travel, and hopefully it works out. But
Yeah.
um yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it
Well,
plays out.
yeah, your experience will probably be different than mine was. I went to a really weird military school, so it was a little harder to have, I don't know, clarity of vision in an environment like that. But all I can say is, I mean, I don't know. You seem like a sharp guy, but for sure, if there's an idea that kind of is a recurring idea and it keeps coming back to one thing, and you kind of entertain other ideas, but it always comes back. I don't know, man. That's your conscience speaking to you, and I think there's some power behind that. And it's like you don't want to ignore those little voices in your head, because I think the people who do ignore that, they end up leading a very unfulfilling and sad life. A very fear-based life. And you mentioned the thing about the American dream. That's in the eye of the beholder. You know what I mean? I don't think you have to be part of the machine. The economic machine. And I think more people are starting to kind of wake up to that. But I think as long as you kind of start to develop a good, strong plan, and you're not just in the dream phase, clearly you're not in the dream phase. Like, you're a guy that's going out and doing things, and that's really admirable. I thought you were older than 17. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't even know. I was like picking my nose when I was 17. I don't even remember. Like, so that's awesome. And I want more people hearing that kind of message, that, especially in this, day and age where, I don't know, I don't want to get to a point where I'm like, oh, them damn young people. But, a lot of people they live in this world. And it's like,
definitely.
I don't need to go to French Polynesia. I'll just watch a YouTube video about it. Pretty much. Maybe put on some 3D goggles and experience it in the 3D world. But, more people need to be getting those life experiences. And I think that's going to give you like way more clarity of vision, especially than I had. My vision was real. I don't know. It was dusty back then. It's clearer now, but again, I've got kids of my own, and it's my responsibility to, lay that groundwork for them. But
Definitely.
But yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm interested. I know, your future plans really. Like, you're a guy that I'm going to be following for sure. I mean, anytime somebody's already like hitting it this hard, this early on, I'm like, man, this dude's going to have done some wild stuff 10 years from now. Like, and you'll only be 27 then. I'm 36. It's don't let your foot off the gas. But well, what are the plans for this year? Let's say this year specifically. You got anything especially in mind for 2023 before the end of the year? Any like end of year objectives?
Yeah. So end of year objectives. I wanna, I mean, from a more shallower like fishing perspective versus like just life, I want to catch like an 80-pound GT. That's my goal, and I want to knock Dorado off the list. So, there's why I have all these plans kind of starting to come together on the Dorado trip, and that's a funny story on how that got planned. Because I somehow ended up with a free Dorado trip, and it was crazy how that worked out.
Yeah.
But Papua New Guinea is so cool, and that's like my end of year resolution would be to get to Papua New Guinea successfully, because I mean it's as far as you can get basically. It's I got a layover in Australia. It's way the heck over there.
Mm-hmm.
If I could get to Pop Out successfully, spend 14 days there fishing my butt off, and then come back successfully with a ton more stories. 2023 is looking to be pretty good. I mean, I can't wait for what the future holds, you know. Always just got all these ideas floating around in my head on, oh God, where should I go next? What do I want to do, you know? And I'm just, you know, plans tend to change pretty easily, and I'm just glad I've got this starting to get figured out. But yeah, Bolivia is a funny story on how that happened. So, if you want, I can tell you about it. But
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear. I'm interested.
so my dad and my grandpa were supposed to go to Bolivia. Um, well, and I was supposed to go too, but this was way back in 2020 when they had this booked. And it was going to be like a cool father, you know, it was going to be a grandfather, father, son kind of deal, the three of us. And then all of a sudden this pandemic hits, and obviously Bolivia is completely out of the picture.
Mhm.
And my dad almost forgot that he had paid for the trip. He had like put these deposits down. And I talked to him again in 20 like last year, and I was like, "Hey dad, are we going to Bolivia? Because you've basically paid for the trip. Like, let's go." And he said, "Son, I think I'm a little too old to fish for 10 days straight in the jungle." And I was like, "What? Come on." And I tried so hard. I was like, "Dad, this is once in a lifetime. This is crazy fishing. It's Golden Dorado. I mean, come on." And he was like, "No, I think we're just, you know, just gonna have to cancel that." And a couple of months later, I was talking to Kevin, my good friend who I've told you briefly about, who I went on the bus with, and I was like, "Kevin, we should do a big fishing trip together." And he said, "Let's go to Bolivia." And that all of a sudden I remembered that we had two spots already deposited, and the third one we hadn't paid for, thank God. And I walked up to my dad. I was like, "Hey dad, you know you've got those spots booked. You wanna let me and my friend take them because you're not coming?" And he said, "Yes." And I didn't expect him to say that. I thought he'd kind of given up on that trip, and he thought it'd be a cool experience for the two of us to do. You know, this is like 2 months after I turn 18, so this is
Mhm.
gonna be kind of my first real experience out there without any form of group or anything, you know, no family, nothing. And it's good. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really good for me, but I'm just stoked that I don't have to pay for it, because Pop Al is going to suck probably all the money I've saved up dry, which is perfectly fine because it's all I live for.
What do you
Um,
got your eyes on in Papua New Guinea? Is it those New Guinea bass?
that would be we're going for GTs.
Okay,
So
okay. So you're gonna be more of the saltwater,
yeah, it's
but
got so much diversity over there in PNG, and it's
mhm.
cool. So definitely a little nervous on that one. I think Bolivia will be a great step into it, because that's a big trip to do at 18.
Yeah,
And that trip's going to be cool. It's all, you know, we're all going to be camping on the beach with this expedition group, you know, staying in like A-frame huts that had been built, you know, the island's uninhabited. It's really cheap. I mean, you know, you're not there's no toilet, there's a hole in the ground and no air.
right.
So, definitely not your typical lodge. I think you know, the tents and just staying on the beach and catching your own food is really appeals to me a lot, and I like that too. You can get to this crazy fishing, and the airfare's ridiculous over there. I can't even believe it, because no one really goes to PNG. You know, I don't think it's a very popular tourist
Yeah.
destination. You know, except if you want to go fish for 2 weeks. But yeah, it's just I can't wait, and I know it's a year away, but I'm still just like dreaming of GTs on top water. So,
Well,
um,
I'll be watching intently, and I don't know, man. Your energy about this stuff is infectious. I hope that you are continue like sharing the experiences
yeah,
because it may be unbeknown to you, and I always wonder that. But when you put that stuff out there, there's somebody that's going to can't help but be inspired by, especially a story like the story that you're telling here. Maybe somebody's listening, the photos that you take, even the wildlife photos you take. I mean, all those things are instrumental in kind of keeping this, I don't know, spirit of outdoorsman alive. And I don't know if you're the type that does it by fishing with gummy worms and acting silly, sure. But I don't know. I really like your style. I think more people need to hear this message and be pursuing passions and pursuing experiences. I mean, just getting out there, and I mean, I don't know, that's so much more valuable than like things that you could be buying or having some high-end job. It's like you're living a very fulfilling life already. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know, the energy is pretty awesome, and I hope people are taking that away from this. That was a big part of the reason I wanted to have you on here. So I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about that stuff. I mean, I feel like you're like a chapter book, and we may have to catch up and do another episode another time, because like, you're like I think you're like, your story's not done yet. You know what I mean? So,
definitely not.
I gotta follow up after you've done some of these trips, but I got all the confidence you'll accomplish the goals that you set out for. But it's awesome.
I mean, there's my New Year's resolution: get 2 big trips done and come back alive with no horrible Bolivian botfly or something, growing out of my skin. So either way, I think Golden Dorado is well worth it.
Oh yeah. Well, listen, I almost wish we'd have started with this, but I mean, we've talked about your photography, we've talked about your photos of fishing, and the people who are listening are gonna be like, okay, cool, that's great, good story. I want to see this stuff. If somebody wanted to see like your photos or your photography page or your whatever, any socials, anywhere that people can learn more about you, maybe ask you questions, like how would people find you?
Yeah, so right now I'm pretty much totally on Instagram as far as social media goes. I'm very rarely on Facebook. I have an account. I use that to communicate with my grandparents, and that's about it. But I have 2 separate accounts. One is where I post all my media related stuff, so that'd be a little more professional. And that'd be at George Hadaway Media on Instagram. And I'll just be posting on there, photos that I've taken really anywhere. Doesn't matter where, just as long as they're taken with this. And and with that, like, I have my personal account where that's where I'm going to be posting, just cool stuff I'm doing, a little update from Bolivia or whatever, and just cool pictures, and that's a lot like where my friends can check in on, and where, it's a little more, I guess, teenage related more than anything, more Gen Z. But yeah, I post, like, that's where probably I post a lot of my fishing stuff. It's just on there. I'll just put a dump of like 10 photos and, of stuff I caught wherever I was. And that's just George Hadaway. So George Hadaway, and then George Hadaway Media.
All right. Well, I'll end up adding that to like the description of this. And if I can figure out how to do it, I'll put it up on the video. And I'm sure other people will start tuning in to watch the next thing you're going to next place you find yourself in. I know I'll be watching, but man, I really appreciate your time. And anyway, we got to keep in touch for sure, even after this. So,
of course.
All right, man. Well, you have a good one. All right.
Yeah. You as well, David. It was great joining you on this. And as you know, I'm always down to talk fishing, travel, photography, adventure. So yeah, let me know and we'll keep in touch.
Definitely. We will definitely be talking.
All right. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, man. Thank you for listening to the Boundless Pursuit podcast. If you enjoyed this show, your feedback, comments, and reviews are very important to me. Also, this podcast is just one element to a much bigger content outlet. I urge you to head over to www.havrodswilltravel.com, where you'll find audio, visual, and written editorial content. That is 3 dimensions of awesome fishing content brought to you by a very dynamic team of anglers. I hope that you'll tune in next week as we continue to build this program and have interesting and skilled anglers each Thursday. Thank you for listening.